All right, take two. When we work with our colored pencils, we're thinking of the color family and chroma. So we talk about color family as a hue. So if I have a color family, I'm referring to the hue of the color. So you've got a bunch of different blues, perhaps blue greens. That's a similar color family. Warm colors, cool colors. On canvas, there's that's violet. On canvas, there's charts that show you the warm, cool, primary, secondary, tertiary colors. I'm not one to just sit there and reread everything other than my own syllabus and my expectations. So you guys can go over that. We'll use it a little bit when we get into our own projects, when we're talking about things like what colors should I use or what colors should I pick to make a harmonious color scheme. Stuff like that is good to know. You guys are still working a lot from observation. A lot of that is done photographically for you. But if you're working a little bit more conceptually, using complementary colors and split complements and triadic color things, that's valuable knowledge. We get more into that in the honors section next year, so get your feet wet with it with this project. Otherwise, pay attention to my advice. I like color. But color family or hue, we're just talking about colors. Blues, greens, warm colors, cool colors. We also talk about chroma, which is the grays. We've talked about when we're looking at anything in reality, there's neutral colors, your gray areas. My skin tone has a lot of gray in it, as much as it has peach and ochre and burnt siennas in it. It's got a lot of gray. When we do our colored pencil drawings, especially on what we've already done, our grays are already done with our 6B pencils. So if I have my 6B pencil and I'm fading that down into my 4, into my 2, into my H, I'll blend that out just real quick. And this shows up a lot better on a stiffer sheet of paper with a little bit more tooth. But I've got a good range of value from solid black, basically, all the way down to white. I'm gonna use my finger again. Where you have white paper underneath, you're gonna get a more true hue, okay? Where you have your gray areas underneath, you're gonna have more of a contaminated hue, a chroma. Even if you use your carbon pencil, or this is charcoal for my solid black, it's still going to create a gray neutral, okay? In order to create a bright highlight, and this is very important, in order to create something that it stays white and not having to worry about staying out of that area as you're coloring in, you have to use a resist. You have to use your white colored pencils down here at the end to create a resist, to create a wax covering on top of your white paper. If you don't do that, you're never going to be able to erase down to white. You'll be able to take a bit off, but with colored pencils, think of it like juice box on a white t-shirt. It's going to create a stain. You'll be able to soften the stain out a little bit and create a new hue. You'll never be able to create white again, okay? In order to maintain your white, best bet is to think proactively and use a resist. So if I'm thinking white, I'm fading from my right highlight to the left. And you can soften that out as much as you want. Where you have this wax underneath now, you'll be able to add a color. So if I'm using poppy red, that's an orangish red color. If I'm using a poppy red, I'm using the same pressure all the way down. The more color underneath, or the less color underneath, the more pure my color tone is. And then once I get to my white, I'll be able to erase out to white. You don't use a blending stump for your pencils, and this looks kind of rough on the screen. I apologize. You don't use a blending stump to blend this stuff. You'll use your white or another thing in that color family in order to fill in some of those gaps. Okay, but I really want to use. I want to see white again down here. I can erase down to white where I have that the original white color pencils down. Okay, so when we get into our still eyes or our eye, the first thing that you need to do is have the foresight to say, you know what, I have to have this solid white. I need to make sure that I can erase down to solid white here. Okay, so looking at my eye, I need to make sure that I've erased out where my brighter highlights are, namely where this eye is wet. So the wet eye here, graphite and colored pencil tends to make a blue hue. So don't worry about that. It's going to have this kind of like really slate blue, bluish gray. So where I want to have something in the end that's going to be bright white, my suggestion is to always erase as much down to the white of the paper and then prime your paper. So I've got some bright white in here too. Bright white in here. And then another bright white, a little bit more in this area. Okay. Foresight, being able to think ahead a little bit. I've got some pink on my my colored pencils from when I blended the red. Use your finger, use your sanding block to get that residue off, get that pigment off. And now I can come back and say, all right, I want solid white here. Solid white here. And I'm pressing down pretty firmly. Just so that I create a resist. And I'll be able to color on top of this and then erase down to white later on. Where I have that white paper exposed, I can see these a little bit more. I can see this bright white a little bit more. If you don't have a soft colored pencil, it's going to be a little difficult, but it's certainly doable. And like I said, I'm going to color in the entire eye. If you want to just work on the iris, go for it. But just foresight, I know that I want to have this top part of my reflection here white as it gets a little more colorful, a little bit grayed out in my reference down towards the bottom. I'm not going to press down as hard. I'm leaving some of that graphite on there around this so that when I blend it out, it has a seamless transition. And we're good to go. Okay. All right. There is nothing bright white in here in the iris. We just need to figure out what color our eyes are. I've got a chart, and you could just do eye chart on Google. I'm gonna do half blue, half brown. You guys are choosing your eye color. I don't care what color your eyes are. I just want you to focus on a color family right now. So if I'm saying I'm going to do blue eyes, I'm not just picking one freaking blue. I'm picking a dark blue. I'm picking a light blue. I'm picking as many blues as I can possibly think of or see. And no black. No black just yet. We're going to learn to mix our blacks. I've got a bunch of different blues here, from a dark blue, navy, to a little bit brighter navy, to a sea blue, to a really pale blue. If you don't have that many blues, who cares? Pick two of them. The chroma underneath is going to do a lot of the work for you. Your eraser is going to do a lot of the work for you to create different chromas, to create different hues. But if you have a slew of colors, use a slew of colors. And if you have different colored pencils, use it. Okay. I'll use some of the Copenhagen blue. I'll use some of the whatever true blues in the quote unquote cheapo pack. Okay. Just work in a similar family, and you're good to go. If you want vivid red eyes, weird, but go for it. Why not? So I'm going to do half of my eye blue, half of it like a hazelish brown. I like to go dark to light. So my first color is going to be my dark blue. If you're saying I'm going to do green eyes, Mr. Bull, use a dark green. If you don't have a dark green, if you have a solid color green, you can use a little bit of black underneath, or even better, a burnt umber or a dark brown. Use that color underneath. I've got a dark blue. I can say, you know what, if I want this to be even darker, I'm going to add a little bit of my graphite underneath. To make a darker color. All right, so dark to light. Dark blue, dark green, whatever. If you can't have that right out of the package, you're going to mix it. You're going to have your darker chroma gray underneath. And similar to what I did with my graphite, I'm not pressing down hard. The harder you press down, the more you're marrying yourself to this color. We want to be able to play the field a little bit, build your color through layers. So if this isn't dark enough, or if this isn't blue enough, I'm going to just add a little bit more layers on top from the inside. Go into your pupil too. You can leave a little bit of that that highlight there if you wanted. And like I said, I'm not pressing down hard. A lot of my drawing is done for me because of what I did underneath. It's like painting a house. You have so much time to prep the house. You're doing so much prep work, and then the product is done in very little time. Same thing. We've done all of our prep work. We can go a little into our highlight there. When I get into my darker shadows above, it barely shows up. I've got so much graphite underneath that it's a really, really dark chroma. And even when I get into my pupil, it's really, really dark, but it does add this really subtle change from really, really dark gray to this really, really dark slate blue. I can go all the way through my eye if I wanted to. And that's giving me a color family all by itself because of what I did underneath. Okay. Focus on not pressing down too hard, especially if you're working. Like I said before, if you're working on printer paper, this is going to be kind of a pain in the butt. Maybe I say I want to have some of this lighter blue only on this outside part. As I get to my next layer, I might need to press down a little harder. All my lines are still going to the center of my paper, or the center of my pupil. If it's starting to look like one solid color, I can always come back and add some white. This is going to start to blend out my colors a little bit, so maybe I'm going to be lifting up my pencil a little bit more, lifting up my pencil a little bit more, spinning it around. You'll start to see spots where maybe you didn't have enough color underneath anyway. Maybe I add a little bit of green to it. Screw that, maybe I mix my own green. Maybe I take a yellow or a gold. Consider doing that. So if I want to have a lighter green, instead of working with what you have in your box, it is my hope that your elementary school teachers taught you that orange and blue, or yellow and blue make green, as opposed to going with your right out of the box green.
Mr. Ball?
Yep.
Did you use dark blue for like the bottom half,
yep,
and like the very top?
So
you use light blue in the middle, right?
Yeah, my philosophy is start dark and then go to your brighter colors and then backtrack. Okay.
All right.
So I'm going back to my darker colors here, thinking back to how I created the original black and white underdrawing. So I'll go a little bit darker, a little heavier handed. I'm not touching black just yet. It is very important that, I mean, I'm still making like that flower pattern just a little bit more focused. So I've got a little bit of green on the edge. If I want to make it even brighter, I can come back with my white. And the more layers you add, the more it blends. Okay, like I said, we're not using our blending stump. We'll use that later. Colorless blenders are available, and I didn't give these to you guys because they become a crutch, and you guys just sit there and you'll go through an entire pencil in one drawing. But if you want to go to Michael's or wherever, colorless blenders or burnishers, all it is the your colored pencil minus the pigment. Okay, and that will give you a good color. If you have a lot of white paper showing and you just can't figure out how to burnish and how to get that white paper from showing, go use a blender. Go find a colorless blender, Amazon them. They're not really necessary for you guys. Okay, you get your blending through your layers and burnishing. Once you get to your top layers and I start pressing down a little harder, that's called burnishing. That's going to basically solidify that color in there. So let's say I like that color and I want to have this fade out into, somebody give me another color. It doesn't have to be any particular eye color. It could be something out of this world. Purple. Okay. So I choose my violet or my purple. I've got a dioxazine purple here. With a mulberry color here. So again, color family, start with dark. If I want to blend this out into my blue, if I go out into my white a little bit, I colored outside my lines, who cares? Try to stay close to your line. You'll be able to add that line back in a little bit. Anywhere you have graphite, it is very important that you have colored pencil on top. as I go into my color, my other color, just to have a nice fade. As I get further away from that purple, I'm not pressing down as hard, but there's still purple that goes pretty much all the way to the left. I'm going to use my dark blue again. Color family, I think purple kind of goes along. Both color families, warm and cool.
We can stick to one color throughout the entire eye, right?
You sure can.
All right.
Making my weird looking flower pattern for mom. I can leave it like that, and the violet's not showing up really well at all on the screen. But I can burnish it a little bit more with my white. Again, burnishing is just pressing down a little harder, having a little bit of that color being created, or a different hue being created by pressing down harder. I've got a pad or a pad of paper underneath my drawing, but if I had a stiffer surface, this would show up a little bit better. You can always come back and press down harder. You can subtract a little bit. Like if I wanted to have this line a little bit more vivid, I can erase out a little bit. With whatever eraser your needed eraser, it isn't going to do much at all. And you're never going to go back down to white. It looks pretty pale. But something like that works really, really well to create a new chroma, a new hue for your colors. So you can always erase out, but you're never going to go back to white. Okay?
Mr. Ball, how did you get like that separation between the inner part of the iris and the outer part? Like that's not like dark blue.
Like here and here?
So like yeah, between that area, like the wider space that's like not one of the dark blues. How did you do that?
This right here?
Yeah.
I took my black eraser or any of my stiffer erasers. Your art
Where's
gun.
Mom?
Your art gun would work as well. Okay.
Oh, so we color the entire thing and then we erase to give it that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
You can do that. Like if I can stop here. Like if I'm going, give me a color, Carmine.
Green. I don't know.
What color? You do know.
Green. Dark green, I guess.
Let me see if I have dark green. Just for the time, I'm going to go dark green here. And I'm not going to add any color into that spot. So that's one way of doing it. And then when I come, this is dark green, and then I'll use a grass green, a lighter green. And just thinking color families, maybe instead of using a white to blend this, I could use a yellow for like a goldenrod color. But if I use a yellow here and I leave a little bit of that white space like untreated still, I can leave it like that. And then when I blend it, like to burnish, I can just use white and go really heavy right here, as opposed to erasing. It makes a very similar texture. And then when I can really just burnish out the entire thing if I wanted to. Like if I blended this here with the white, as long as my lines are going to my pupil, it just looks okay. It looks good. It's not as vivid because my colors are a little bit darker on that left side, but same concept. If I wanted this white inside of my purple to be a little bit more prevalent, I could press down harder with the white. I can always erase out. When you're erasing out with whatever eraser it is, make sure your eraser is clean. especially on a brighter spot. On a darker spot like this, it doesn't really matter. But if I needed to erase out over here and I start erasing, you're going to deposit some color. Okay. The firmer the eraser, the better, I think. Then I can just come back with the white afterwards and keep those lines going. I'm going to embellish some of that in the middle so it doesn't look like the same color on the outside and the inside. I'll wait till I get to my black for that. I'll do some brown eyes. I've got an ochre color. Violet. I don't really have a brown. You can create neutral colors, neutral browns by mixing color complements. Your color complements are easy to remember, I think.
Mr. Ball.
Sometimes an electric sharpener is great. Yeah.
So when we do our iris, do we have to do it like multiple different colors, like you're doing, or can we just stick
Whatever
with
you want.
one?
Pick a color. Pick your favorite color. Pick your eye color. As long as you're working in a color family and not just like one solid green, I'll be happy. Okay.
Okay, and I also have one more question.
What is it?
What is the point of like the black colored pencil or any of the darker colored pencils when you're like using it on the lighter colors?
Contrast.
Contrast. Okay.
Yeah. So right now I don't have any solid black on my paper. Even with the carbon pencil, even with the charcoal, there's no solid black. You're always going to have this kind of charcoalish gray with your graphite, right? When I come back with my black colored pencils, that's where I'm going to really enforce my core shadows. Okay, so that's what those are for. On a white sheet of paper, the white colored pencil seems completely pointless, but we've used it a lot here to blend. Yeah, there's use for all the colors. Okay. If you guys are working on a tone sheet of paper, which next year, if you guys are taking honors, you will be working predominantly with an off-white sheet of paper or a gray or a butcher brown sheet of paper, just to alleviate the need to have a non-white sheet of void. And then you add your highlights in with your midtones that are already done. So like for my brown, I talked about color complements. If I want to have a darker brown, instead of using black or if the dark gray underneath, the colored pencil underneath wasn't working for me, I could use my indigo blue, my dark navy blue on top of it. And that's going to give me a richer color than right out of the box. We talk about rich colors versus like really cheap colors. Cheap, I use that term as right out of the box. Cheap colors. A cheap black is right out of the box, but mixing a green and a red to create a neutral color. Sometimes with the black, most of the time with your graphite underdrawing, that creates a unique black. Black isn't just black. There's jet black and Mars black. There's a bunch of different colors that even with colored pencils, mixing your colors is very important. okay? All these colors are mixed. None of that is directly out of the box. If you're going directly out of box, go back to first grade. Let's try to avoid that as much as possible. Because we're smarter than first graders sometimes. Instead of using black here, I can use my indigo blue or my navy blue, or if you have a neutral gray in your pack, you can use a dark gray. It just looks like a better color than just straight up one other color. And I can always come back and with my brighter colors, you mentioned your brighter colors. If I use a bright blue going along the entire drawing, that'll unify my colors a little bit more. As it's mixing with my browns, it looks kind of stupid because I didn't put any color underneath there. But this will create a little bit of unification for my drawing so it doesn't look like really half-assed. Still paying attention to my lines going to the center of my pupil. I want to focus on that. And I'm just going to stop talking and finish this up real quick so that we can move on to skin before the class is over. Just for tomorrow, have one of your still lives. We'll get into that. Have one of your still lives ready to color in. I went up into my highlight a little bit. If I needed to erase out any, I can, because I still have that white resistance underneath. And then my black. I want you guys to avoid using just the solid color black. Have a color underneath it. We've got some chrome underneath it. We got the graphite underneath it. But if I want this to be a warmer color, a lot of times I'll use a red underneath, like just a shade of crimson. It's too pink. Poppy red. To warm up the eye. And make sure that you're saturating anything that you're coloring in. We don't want to have any of the graphite necessarily showing. Okay, it's going to show up really, really gray and really, really, you're going to have that chroma. But essentially all the colored pencil or all the graphite is covered by the colored pencil. Okay, that's the point. So now when I use my black on top of that red or on top of a blue, that's going to create, like with a red, it's a Mars red. With the blue, it's an ivory blue or a jet blue. Ivory is a little bit more neutral in my book. Jet blue is more bluish, or jet black is more bluish. Mars black is red. And just because we're using black, it's not right out of the box. We have this, we have a color underneath, we have the chroma underneath. The chroma doesn't do a whole lot for it, but that red underneath does a bunch. And now I'm gonna focus on my edge. So get that circle in there nicely, go through your iris a little bit, so I'm making my pupil a little bit bigger. And just make sure that it's colored in completely. Try not to be too scratchy. Anytime that you have an outline, start from your outline and fade in, just like we did with the still lives. That way it looks like everything is colored in, everything's saturated and not outlined. So I've got a bit of a heavier outline there. I can drag that in here. And if it still looks a little rough, I can always go back to what I did in the beginning. Drag out a little bit of those shadows, a little bit of those darks from the center of your pupil along the edge there. You can do them a little bit on your edge here. Avoid going super heavy-handed with black, especially when you're adding some line work. If I wanted to really boost that shadow there, I've got my violet and my blue. Put a little bit of that black on top. Goes a long way. Start from that line and fade down. Start from that line and fade down. And where I don't have any colored pencil underneath, this is where like that chroma goes a long way. That graphite goes a long way to blending my black, and you can't see it as well on the screen. Okay. Try not to add any black into the white just yet. This really boosts my color. If I want something a little bit more vivid with the color in my iris, I go back to my white, and I'm kind of trying to stay out of anywhere that I added that black. It's just going to look really gray. And I can press down really hard to really pull out some of those colors. Again, I avoid anywhere that I use that white, or the black rather, just because it grays out a lot. I don't like the color it makes. If you do, go for it. When we get to our edges, like over here, I'll use my white to blend that out. It's good to use an off-white. If you have a cream color, that's great. If you have a really, really peachy color, like almost a beige, that works really well. If you're just working with white though, that's fine too. The chroma underneath is going to create a color for us when we do the white of our eye in just a sec. We want vivid colors too. Vibrancy is a big part of adding color. If you're sitting back and you see a lot of the white paper, man up, start leaning into it a little bit more, especially with your last few layers, your burnishing layers. If you're just weak wristing this entire thing, it's gonna look like crap, okay? Work in layers and work in vivid colors. Even if it's a neutral brown color, you can get some really bright highlights in there. Use a little bit of orange, use a little bit of the yellow with your browns. Blend it back in with the brown, blend it in with the white, make it into more of a hazily color, add a little bit of green to it, okay? You should have enough paper where you can just sit here and color test and color test and color test to your heart's content. You know, I like this looking green, and then that green with my brown. It's an interesting color. Maybe I blend it again with my green, and that's my own brown. That is my own baby poop looking brown, green. Okay. Good neutral color, color that you can't buy. So it makes it more rich, that makes it more vivid, makes it more valuable. Color transitions, just like with using the eraser, where you have highlights in your shadows, you need to have a little bit of that purple going into your green here, and you need to have a little bit of your purple going into that blue here, just so that you have kind of a seamless looking transition. If it looks like chunk, 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 pie chart, let's avoid that. Okay, take a color, a burnishing color, a white. The white will often pick up some of that pigment from all the way around and give you a good blend. If you have the colorless blender, that would absolutely do it. All right, I'm gonna do my tear duct. I'm gonna pick a red and a purple, maybe even an orange. So I've got a regular red, got a violet somewhere. I lost my purple. Got a red, violet, white. I'll use white a lot to blend, and then kind of an orangish color. Goldenrod color. A yellowed orange color. I'll use those 4 colors in my just my tear duct over here. Dark to light. If I outline a little bit, I'm not pressing down hard. I know that I've got a darker shade on this point of my eye here. I'm not pressing down hard. I can still see a little bit of those highlights, not much, but a little bit. I'm going to focus on adding violet along this entire thing. I'm even going over where I have my resist. I'll be able to erase that back out later with my white, or with my eraser and my white. But in order to have a good transition, I need to have this purple color underneath the entire thing. And then my red. Whichever red you choose to use, doesn't matter. If I want my tear duct to be a lot more purple or red, I'll press down a little bit harder. But it's going to be mixed with that purple. And then when I get into those highlights, that's where my eye really starts to see that red come out. And if I'm a little less satisfied with it, I can take any of my erasers, go to where my highlights are. I can erase out, and I'm digging into the white and into where the red is. And to get this to show up a little bit more, I'm going to re-add my white in some of those spots. Re-add the white, re-add the white. And then when I use my red around it, I'm going to stay out a little bit of those white areas. And that's going to enforce my glossiness. And that's going to give me a good transition from white to lighter red to darker red, all the way to my red violet. That's pretty vivid. As opposed to where these highlights are, I'll just use my white pencil, press down hard, and then fade out. Press down hard and fade out. Same colors, but without that white underdrawing, I'm not going to have that super vivid color.
So, Mr. Ball, how did you say you needed to clean the white colored pencil so like you're not spreading
All I
stuff
do,
you've already blended?
if you have thick skin, you can use your thumb. It's waxy, so you can just rub it off, or you can use another sheet of paper, or you can use your sanding blocks. But I think it's easy enough to just use your thumb. If I was wearing an apron, I would just color my apron. But it cleans off pretty easily. I can make that transition a little bit further, just press down a little harder from that highlight, fade into that red, and then if my purple's not showing up, I can either mix my own purple or come back with a purple. I'm really happy with this indigo blue color. Very good color mixed with my red. You know, that red and blue make purple, I hope. It's a smaller area. If you guys are drawing small, again, shame on you. You want to be able to have enough room to color, even though when you're coloring in pretty, you're working in smaller areas first. I can burnish with a harder pencil. Mixing this really pretty, rich red color. I'm going to add a little bit of that going into my my actual eyeball, but still kind of having a firm edge here. Okay. All right, the white of the eye. If you have an off-white, if you have a beige color or a cream color, even better, use that first. If not, focus on getting a good range of value in the sphere of your eye. So I'm looking at my reference. I've got a good dark here. So I need to make sure that this is solid enough. Okay, if it's really, really pale, you're not going to get enough transition with just the white colored pencil like I'm going to use. Try and get a good range of value before you add any of the white. And then I still have a little bit of graphite here, as bright as that looks like on your screen. It's still a little pale gray. If you have a gray, you could use a gray too. Clean off my white. Start from your highlights. And I'm pressing pretty firmly. Avoid getting into the color. And I'm basically just burnishing with my white. I don't like this white. I'm going to use my Prismacolor white. It's a softer color. So once I get into that gray, still burnishing, pressing down hard. Once I get into that gray, it's just creating this kind of really slate bluish color, blue-gray. And you can work from your shadows back in to your highlights if you want. It's usually about now where my students are terrified that their eyes turning really, really blue. That's okay. You can gray it out afterwards. But because blue as my eye is, once I do my skin tone, this becomes white. Okay. Again, if I'm blending out that color from the edge of my eye, just be careful when you get into the white of the eye, because you're going to get these streaks of purple and I'll get streaks of blue over here. So just be conscious as you're dragging down from that edge. Maybe I need to wipe that off a bit. As far as our colors go, we know that we're mixing colors. We know that our white doesn't do much other than burnish and blend on our white sheet of paper. It doesn't make it valueless. I'm gonna go use my sharpener. Really sharp pencil is not going to do me any good. Break the tip off as I color into my highlights there, where I had that original resist. I really don't need to erase that out again. At least I shouldn't need to. You can try and stay away from them as much as you want, so they really show up. Where I have that graphite, I need to have colored pencil on top. If you don't have colored pencil on top of your graphite, your finishing is going to look weird. You can always spray it down with something. But think of graphite as metal and this as wax. This is a matte. This is going to eat the light. It's not going to glow as much. It's like a satin paint versus a high gloss paint. High gloss being the graphite, it looks shiny, looks metallic. Your white colored pencils or any of your other colored pencils are going to have this matte, satiny, waxy look. Okay, like I said, this is blue. This is a shade of sky blue. Just because of the graphite underneath. Once I add my color underneath my skin tone, it's going to be white. Okay. And I'm not requiring you guys to do the skin color. it's, take my word for it, it's going to be white. We'll do the eyelashes probably tomorrow when we finish this up. Any questions? I told you the due date is Friday for this. We'll work on this a little bit more tomorrow. We'll do one of your still lives as a colorful thing, and then next week we'll get into our concept drawings. And that is where you are using everything you learned with your colored pencils to one of your own drawings. Hopefully it is not necessarily a still life. Hopefully you got a little bit from those Satric gallery things as inspiration. You can pick and steal from their concepts, apply it to your own artwork. Okay. In order to know if you're like saturated enough, I don't think it's gonna, yeah, you can kind of see it. So looking at my paper, anywhere that I see those like vivid glows that are a different surface, like a different kind of finishing than my wax, I'm gonna go back and add some colored pencil to it. I don't see any of that, but if you'll be able to tell the difference on your paper more so than what I see on mine. I hate this right here, so I'm gonna come back and add some dark, a little bit of a lighter blue around just that spot, so it doesn't look like a lumpy circle. You can use the indigo, you can use navy blue. If you want to use a little bit of black and then a color on top of it, that works. Just to outline, and then from your outline fade into towards your iris or towards your pupil. Avoid any horizontal lines going through your iris. All your lines should be kind of diagonal or linear going towards your iris. Pupil, towards your pupil. Make sure that your eye is buried. You can always come back and add graphite on top. So if this shadow isn't vivid enough, you can add some graphite on top, a soft graphite. So this is a 6. I can always go a little bit darker to keep my eye buried. Blend that down with your blender. It's going to adhere a little bit, but this is where you'll get that change in finishing. It'll look a little bit, a different kind of shine. I don't know if it'll show up on the computer screen, but yeah, a little bit. And then I'll come back with my white on top of that to soften it in. And even if I just add a little tiny bit of white up there, that's going to maintain our surface. It's an illusion to lie to your general public, your patrons. Hey, I did all of this with my colored pencils. I didn't do any of it with my graphite. It makes you look like a genius, albeit a little bit of a lie. If you wanted to add any veins, this is a good time to do that. Just do it lightly with a red pencil. The lighter you do it, the more it looks like it's underneath your the white gelatin of your eyeball. I like to blend out a little bit of red from my tear duct. So really, really lightly with some red. It's going to give you this pinkish hue, this pink color. You don't have to do this if you don't want. Then I'll blend it out with my white. Just to warm it up, make it a little bit more lively. Okay. All right, I'm gonna kill the video in just a sec and then answer some questions if you guys have them. Just going over real quick what we did today. We have our black and white underdrawing. That's our chroma. That determines our chroma of our colors. When we think of our colors, we're thinking of chroma, and we're thinking of hue. Hue is the color, red. The chroma creates different grays, grayed out hues. We know that this is a red tear duct. There's just a bunch of different reds. That's your color family. And a lot of that is done because of the graphite drawing underneath. Mixing our colors, making sure that we're not just working directly from the box. Why do we do that? It creates a much more vivid color, a much richer color. As long as we're working in color families, it's not going to create these really muddied out colors. We have a lot of color contamination, a lot of colors grayed out, a lot of new colors because of what we have underneath, but the neutrals are done with chroma, not a brown, mixing your complements together. If I mixed red into here, it's going to create more of a brown, a different kind of gray neutral. Focusing more on what we've learned, building on what we've learned with the graphite underdrawings for that, to mix our own colors. Heavily saturated, making sure that we build up our layers, and then our last few layers are our burnishing layers, where we're pressing down a little bit harder with our lighter colors to get rid of the white paper, to get rid of any of that shiny graphite. To make a more consistent surface finishing than like having some of this waxy like satin color or satin finish, or from the colored pencils, and then this metallic graphite. We want to have consistency throughout. What else? The white resist. Should have started with that. Having the foresight to know that I need to have this to be solid white, because I know that I'm not going to be able to erase out to white. Colored pencils seep into the tooth of the paper. They create stains. You'll be able to erase out a little bit, but you're always going to have a little bit of that color showing. And I think that's it for today. Tomorrow, I'll do a skin tone just so you can see that this is white. The color of the paper is not like white anymore. This is going to become our brightest color relative to all the other colors. So as blue as it may look, it's going to end up being our white. I think that's it. Tomorrow, pick one of your still lives that you want to color. I'm going to work with my the fabric one, or the seated female, and the lemon one. If you want to do another still life today, if you're bored in Mr. Alt's class, I can't see why that would happen. But you can doodle something else. Have something grayed out with your graphite to be able to use colored pencil on top for tomorrow. These will all be due on Friday, and then on Friday I'll introduce your next week's assignment, where we're looking at our own conceptual drawing with color. Okay. If you guys have questions, I will stay after class for a little bit. I'm going to stop recording and get this posted for you guys.